I'm about to reveal something that might shock you. Something that could be happening inside your arteries right now, silently cutting off the most important blood flow in your body. I've spent years watching perfectly healthy people come in for routine checkups, only to discover their arteries had been quietly narrowing for a decade, without a single symptom, without a single warning. These aren't unusual cases or people who neglected their health. I'm talking about the patient who walked every morning, the one who took every medication on time, the one who got their blood work done every single year without missing once. What I'm about to share goes against everything you've been told about how to check your artery health. Most doctors won't tell you this because it simply isn't in the standard appointment. It isn't in the guidelines. But I've seen what happens when it gets missed. Patient after patient, scan after scan. And I'm not willing to stay quiet about it any longer. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly which home test reveals what your blood panel never could. Why your cholesterol number and your actual artery health are two completely different questions. And most importantly, what you can do starting today to get a real answer. This isn't fear-mongering. This is life-saving information. Stay with me because what you're about to learn could literally change what happens at your next appointment. Margaret was 68 years old. And what happened to her is the reason this video exists. She had been a high school English teacher for 34 years. She was organized, careful, and thorough about everything she did. When she retired at 63, she made a decision to take her health seriously. She went to every appointment. She had her blood work done every year without missing once. She asked her doctor questions. She took notes after appointments. She followed the instructions she was given. Her cholesterol numbers had been in the normal range for as long as she could remember. Every year, her doctor reviewed them with her and said the same thing. Everything looks good. She believed him. She had no reason not to. She felt fine. She had no chest pain, no shortness of breath, no dizziness, nothing that suggested anything was wrong. She was the kind of patient the system works well for. Diligent, compliant, consistent. The kind of patient who does not get lost to follow-up, who takes the medication, who shows up. And for 12 years, the system answered the question it was designed to answer and said, everything looks good. Because by the measure it was using, everything did. At 68, she went in for a scan of her abdomen. A minor digestive issue her doctor wanted to look at. The scan came back and the digestive thing was nothing. But the radiologist reading the scan noticed something in the image that was not what they were looking for. Something that appeared by accident. Something that should not have been there. Significant blockage in two major arteries. Her cardiologist reviewed the imaging. He told her she was lucky, that most people with this level of buildup do not find out about it this way. They find out during a cardiac event. That the scan looking for something unrelated had just caught something that could have become very serious. Margaret asked how this was possible. She had been going to every appointment. She had been checking her cholesterol every year for more than a decade. Her numbers were always fine. How did this not show up? Her cardiologist said something she wrote down that night. He said, "The test you have been getting tells you how much cholesterol is floating in your blood. It does not tell you whether your arteries are clogging. Those are two completely different questions. You have been getting the answer to the first question. The second question was never asked." Margaret sat with that for a moment. Then she asked him if there was anything she could have done to catch this earlier. Before the scan, before the accident. He said yes, there is a simple test she could have done at home. She would need a blood pressure cuff, 10 minutes, and a flat surface to lie on. The result would have given her a strong signal that something needed looking at. Years before the scan caught the full picture. She asked why nobody had ever told her to do it. He said they do not have time in a 15-minute appointment to explain things that are not in the current guidelines. And this is not in the guidelines, even though it should be. That test is what I am going to show you today. But first, I need to show you why the test your doctor is running is missing the thing that actually matters. Because understanding that is what makes everything else make sense. The question your blood test is not answering. When your doctor orders a cholesterol test, here is what they get back. Total cholesterol. The LDL number, which most people call the bad cholesterol. The HDL number, the good one. Triglycerides. Each of those measurements is real. None of them is useless. But here is the problem with all four of them. They measure what is floating in your blood. They do not measure what is happening inside your artery walls. Those are two completely separate things. And the thing that causes arteries to clog is not the amount of cholesterol in your blood. It is what happens to that cholesterol when it comes into contact with an artery wall that has been irritated and inflamed on the inside. That is the actual process, and the standard blood test cannot see it. Not because the test is bad, because it is measuring the blood, not the wall. Those are two different locations, two different things. And the one you actually need to know about is the one not being measured. Here's the way to think about it. Imagine your artery wall as a road. When the road surface is smooth and sealed, nothing sticks to it. Cars pass through fine. Now imagine the surface gets damaged. Rough patches, gaps, potholes. Things start catching on those rough spots. They accumulate. The road gets harder to travel. Your artery wall works the same way. When the inner surface is healthy and smooth, cholesterol passing through mostly stays in the bloodstream. This is the process the home test can detect. Not the chemistry, the result of it. Whether the blood is still getting through the way it should. I am almost ready to show you exactly how to do it. 2 more things and we are there. When that inner surface gets irritated and inflamed, it becomes rough and sticky, and cholesterol starts catching on it, especially the kind of cholesterol that has been damaged by that same inflammation. The damaged version is the one that sticks. The standard test measures all the cholesterol together. It does not tell you how much of it is damaged. It does not tell you how much has already caught on the wall. Margaret's cholesterol numbers were in the normal range the entire time her arteries were clogging. Both of those things were true at the same time, because the test was answering a different question than the one that mattered. This is why the home test I am going to show you is so important. It does not measure the cholesterol in your blood. It measures whether the blood is actually getting through your arteries the way it should. That is the second question, the one the blood test cannot answer. But before the test, you need to understand one more thing. Because there are 2 specific things almost certainly missing from your blood panel right now that would give you a much better picture of what is happening inside your artery walls. And both of them are simple. Both of them are available. And neither of them is in the standard annual workup for most seniors. The first thing your blood panel is probably missing. When cholesterol particles travel through an inflamed artery, some of them get damaged. Think of it like an apple left out in the air. Fresh apple is fine. Apple that has been exposed and oxidized turns brown and breaks down. Cholesterol in an inflamed artery goes through the same kind of process. Fresh cholesterol mostly passes through without much trouble. Cholesterol that has been damaged by the inflammation in the artery wall becomes chemically altered, and that altered version is the one that gets stuck in the artery wall lining. It is the one the repair cells rush in to try to clean up. It is the one that starts the whole buildup process. The medical name for this damaged version is oxidized LDL. And here is the important part. The standard cholesterol test does not measure it. It measures all LDL together and gives you one number. That number could be coming from mostly healthy particles, or it could be coming from a high proportion of damaged ones. The single number cannot tell you which. 2 people can have identical LDL numbers and completely different levels of risk depending on how much of that LDL is oxidized. The person with the lower number can actually have more risk if more of their LDL is in the damaged form. The test your doctor is running every year cannot see the difference. This test exists. It is called an oxidized LDL test. It is not expensive. It is not exotic. It is available at most labs. It is simply not included in the standard panel. You can ask for it by name at your next appointment. You can say, I would like to add an oxidized LDL measurement to my blood work this year. I want to understand not just how much LDL I have, but whether it is in the form that is more likely to cause damage. Watch what happens when you say that. You are now 30% of the way through this video, and you already know something most people who have been going to annual appointments for years do not know. The cholesterol test and the artery clogging process are 2 completely different things. The standard panel answers one question. The other question is still open. It is still happening in the dark. Here is the other reason the second question stays in the dark for so long. Most people assume that if something serious were happening in their arteries, they would feel something. a pressure in the chest, shortness of breath, a tiredness that was not there before, something that would be a signal to go get checked. The research does not support that assumption. The body compensates so effectively during the early and middle stages of the clogging process that most people feel nothing unusual at all. Not because the process is mild, because the body is working to keep blood flow normal in spite of it. The compensation is so good that even a 50% narrowing of an artery often produces no symptoms a person can detect. The first detectable symptom in many cases is the event the narrowing eventually causes. This is not a failure of awareness. It is how the process works. The body is not sending warning signals because it is managing the problem in the background. Until it cannot. Stay with me. The second missing piece explains Margaret's situation in a way the cholesterol test never could. If this sounds familiar, the first link in the description says, "Get your protocol." Not a supplement list. Picture the appointment where you walk in with a number you took at home, hand it to your doctor, and watch his expression change. The appointment where the second question finally gets asked, where you walk out with a referral instead of just an adjusted dose. That appointment. The second thing your blood panel is almost certainly missing. And this second thing, more than the first, is what explains what happened to Margaret. It also brings us closer to the home test, the one I told you about at the start. The one requiring a blood pressure cuff and 10 minutes lying flat. We are getting there. One more piece first, because without this piece, the test result is just a number. With it, the number is a story. Your body makes a waste product as part of a completely normal process. When everything is working right, this waste product gets broken down quickly and cleared out of the system. You never know it was there. When it is not being cleared properly, it builds up. And when it builds up, it does something very specific to the inside of your artery walls. It scratches them. Not dramatically, not in a way you can feel. But the inner lining of the artery wall, the part that is supposed to be smooth and slippery so blood passes through freely, takes damage from this waste product every time it builds up. The damage is small each time, but it never stops, and that is the part nobody ever explains. And it is the kind of damage that invites the clogging process to start. The scratched surface becomes rough. The rough surface catches the damaged cholesterol. The damaged cholesterol starts building up. The process begins. The waste product is called homocysteine, and it has been linked to arterial damage in the research for more than 20 years. Study after study has found that people with elevated homocysteine have significantly higher rates of arterial disease, heart attack, and stroke, even when their cholesterol numbers are completely normal, even when they are doing everything right, even when every other marker the doctor checks looks fine. Margaret's homocysteine had never been measured. Not once in all the years she had been going to her annual appointments. When it was finally tested after her scan, it was elevated, meaningfully elevated. High enough that her cardiologist circled it and said, "This has likely been a factor for some time." The scratch and catch process had been running quietly for years. The artery wall lining had been taking small, constant damage from it. The damaged cholesterol had been catching on the roughened surface. The buildup had been accumulating. And nobody in any of those annual appointments had ever ordered the test that would have shown it. Margaret asked her cardiologist how long she might have had elevated homocysteine. He said he could not know for sure. But based on the extent of the damage in the imaging, and what he knew about how slowly the process typically progresses, he estimated the process had been active for at least 10 years, possibly longer. 10 years of a test never ordered. 10 years of a process nobody looked for. 10 years of damage from something that 3 specific vitamins could have been addressing. Here is the part that makes this so important for you right now. Elevated homocysteine is not treated with medication. It is addressed with 3 specific vitamins: B6, B12, and folate. These are the nutrients the body uses to break homocysteine down and clear it out. When those 3 are at the right level, the waste product gets processed before it can accumulate. The scratching slows down. The artery wall lining gets a chance to stay smoother. Most seniors are low in B12 specifically, not because they are doing anything wrong, because the ability to absorb B12 from food decreases with age. The stomach changes in ways that make the absorption less efficient. A person can be eating plenty of B12 and still be deficient because the body is not absorbing it properly. A simple blood test shows the level. If it is low, supplementing with B12, along with B6 and folate, gives the body what it needs to break down and clear the homocysteine before it can accumulate. The connection between these 3 B vitamins and homocysteine clearance has been documented in the research for decades. The studies are not small. They are not preliminary. They are large, well-designed trials that have consistently found that when homocysteine is elevated and B vitamin levels are optimized, the homocysteine comes down. The scratch-and-catch process slows. The damage to the inner artery wall lining decreases. The surface stays smoother. The damaged cholesterol has less to catch on. None of this requires a prescription. None of it requires a new specialist. It requires knowing one number. And that number is sitting right behind a test that has probably never appeared on your blood panel. The fix is simpler than the missing test, but there is something you need to know before you ask for it. Something that explains why Margaret's numbers looked different from what she expected when they came back. The test is called a homocysteine level. It is a standard blood test. It is available everywhere. It costs very little. You can ask for it by name. You can say, "I would like my homocysteine level checked. I have been reading about the connection between homocysteine and arterial damage, and I want to know my number." Most doctors will order it without hesitation if you ask. They just rarely think to include it without being asked. Margaret asked her cardiologist why this had not been on her panel. He said it was not part of the standard protocol. She asked why not. He did not have a good answer. The standard protocol was built at a time when the cholesterol connection was the main story. The research on homocysteine came later. The guidelines have not fully caught up. The appointment runs for 15 minutes. The things not in the guidelines do not usually make it into those 15 minutes. That is why you are here instead. What is actually happening inside a clogging artery? Most people have the picture slightly wrong. And having the right picture is what makes the home test result mean something when you see your number. Most people imagine clogged arteries the way they imagine a kitchen pipe with scale building up on the inside. The opening gets smaller and smaller. Eventually, it closes. That picture is partially right, but it is missing something important. The part it is missing is why so many people with perfectly normal cholesterol numbers still have significant blockage. Here is what is actually happening, and I want to say it in plain terms because this is the part nobody explains in a standard appointment. The inside of a healthy artery wall is lined with a layer of cells that are, under a microscope, almost perfectly smooth. And here is the thing most people do not know about those cells. Blood slides past without catching on anything. Those cells are also active. They produce a signal that tells the artery to stay relaxed and open. They release something that prevents blood from clotting or sticking. The whole inner surface is designed to be as slippery as possible. When inflammation gets into that layer, those cells stop working right. They start producing different signals. Signals that say, "Come and help, something is wrong here." Repair cells from the bloodstream respond to those signals and move into the artery wall to help. They start absorbing the damaged cholesterol that is now catching on the roughened surface. They fill up with it. They die in place. Their bodies harden over time. The calcium that was supposed to be in the bones gets incorporated into the hardened mass. That hardened mass sits inside the wall, growing slowly, covered by a thin cap of tissue that holds it in place. Most of the time. Until something causes the cap to rupture, and the contents spill into the bloodstream. But that is the end of the process. There is a long middle before it gets there. Covered by a thin cap of tissue. Quiet. No sensation. No signal. Here is the part that surprises most people. The artery does not just narrow from the beginning. For a long time, the artery wall actually expands outward around the growing buildup. It makes room. The opening stays relatively normal. Blood flow stays relatively normal. Symptoms stay absent. The blood test looks normal. The appointment does not raise any alarms. Nothing hurts. Nothing feels different. The buildup keeps growing. The artery keeps making room. But it cannot do that forever. Eventually, the room runs out. The inner opening genuinely narrows. Blood flow becomes restricted. The heart has to work harder to push blood through the narrowed section. The body notices and adapts. Blood pressure rises slightly to compensate. The standard appointment catches the blood pressure change. Nobody connects it to what is happening inside the wall. Or a piece of the hardened buildup, triggered by a spike in blood pressure or some other stress, breaks off from the wall and travels through the bloodstream until it reaches an artery too small to pass through. In the heart, that blocked artery causes a heart attack. In the brain, it causes a stroke. In either case, the process that led to that moment has been building quietly for years. Compensating, making room. Invisible to every blood test in the standard annual panel. That is the moment most people find out the process has been happening for years. The home test exists to find the middle, the quiet years when the artery is compensating, but the compensation is measurable. When the blood is still getting through, but slightly less of it than there should be. That gap is what you are about to learn to check. At home, today. Margaret's cardiologist told her exactly this. He said the arteries they found blockage in had been compensating quietly for a long time. The outer measurements were close to normal. The inner passage was not. Her body had been making room for the problem while the problem kept growing. All of her blood tests looked at the chemistry of her blood. None of them looked inside the wall. None of them could see the compensation happening. She asked him the question that was sitting at the back of her mind since he first told her about the scan result. She asked if there was any way she could have found this earlier, before the accident, before the scan looking for something else stumbled onto it. He said yes. There is a simple test she could have done at home. She would need a blood pressure cuff, 10 minutes lying flat. The result would have given her a clear signal that something needed attention. Not definitive, not the same as imaging, but a signal strong enough to send her for the right follow-up. A signal that would have gotten her into the right conversation, years before a radiologist found the problem by accident. She asked him what the test was. He told her. She wrote it down in the same notebook she had been bringing to appointments for years. The notebook that had her medication names, her question lists, her blood panel results. She added the test name and the instructions to a fresh page near the back. She asked the question that had been sitting at the back of her mind since the cardiologist first said the word lucky. She said, "Is there anything I could have done to catch this earlier?" Before the scan, before the accident. He said yes. He told her about the home test. He told her exactly what she would need and what the result would mean. She wrote it down on a fresh page near the back of her notebook. Then she said, "Why has no one ever told me this existed?" He said most of the patients who come in knowing the right questions learned them outside the appointment. They read something. They watched something. They talked to someone who had gone through a similar situation. The appointment does not teach you what questions to ask. The appointment answers the questions you already know to bring. Margaret said that felt like the most important thing any doctor had ever said to her about her own healthcare. The appointment answers the questions you know to bring. If you do not know to bring a question, it does not get answered. Even if the answer is simple. Even if the answer is available. Even if the test is right there on the same blood draw form. She asked if it was a useful test. He said yes. One of the most practical things a senior concerned about arterial health could do at home. She said, "Then why is it not in the guidelines?" He looked at her for a moment. He said he had not found a satisfying answer to that question the first time a patient asked it, and he still did not have one. You are now 60% of the way through this video. Everything up to this point has been building to what comes next. The test Margaret wrote down. The one that gives you the information the blood panel cannot give you. With a blood pressure cuff you may already have. Today, leave a comment below with whether your doctor has ever told you to check your blood pressure at your ankle. Just a yes or a no. I read every one. And if you have been looking for the morning you lie flat on your bed, take 2 readings, divide one number by another, and finally have something specific to bring to your doctor instead of just a feeling that something might be off, the first link in the description says, "Get your protocol." That morning, that number, that appointment, the first link. Before you do the test, there is one more thing you need to know. Not about how to do it, about what makes it reliable, and about why a home test can give you meaningful information when the tests that require a lab and a blood draw have been missing the problem for years. The reason the home test works is simple. It does not measure the chemistry of your blood. It measures whether blood is physically getting through your arteries the way it should. Those are 2 different things. And the second one is what no blood test has ever been able to catch. which is exactly why this test has been used in clinics for decades, and why nobody told you it existed. It is not measuring chemistry. It is measuring whether blood is physically getting from here to there. Think about it this way. A kitchen faucet can look fine on the outside. The pipes running to it can be full of water at the right pressure. But if something is narrowing the pipe between the main line and the faucet, the flow at the faucet drops. Not to zero, just less. And that drop is measurable. That is the whole idea. You do not need a water chemistry test to find that. You just need to measure the pressure at the faucet and compare it to the pressure at the main line. If the faucet pressure is noticeably lower, something is narrowing the flow. Your ankle is the faucet. Your arm is the main line. The standard blood pressure reading at your arm measures the pressure your heart is sending out. The blood pressure at your ankle measures how much of that pressure is arriving after traveling through all of the arteries in between. A clear path delivers most of the pressure. A narrowed path loses some. The more narrowed the path, the more pressure is lost on the way. If something is narrowing those arteries, the ankle pressure drops relative to the arm pressure. The gap between those two numbers is the signal. The difference is measurable. And it is measurable before symptoms appear, before the compensation runs out, before the event that would otherwise be the first sign of the problem. And it is measurable with the same equipment most seniors already use to monitor their blood pressure at home. This is why doctors and researchers have been using this test in clinical settings for decades. It is not new. It is not experimental. It is a test that has been sitting in clinical cardiology for a long time, quietly doing its job in specialist offices, never making it into the routine advice most seniors receive. And by the end of this video, you will be able to do it yourself. Study after study shows it predicts the risk of heart attack and stroke better than the cholesterol test alone. And it can be done outside a clinical setting with a standard blood pressure cuff. What is different about doing it at home versus having it done in a clinic is precision. In a clinical setting, the test is sometimes done with a device called a Doppler, which can detect blood flow sounds very precisely in the ankle artery. That gives a slightly more accurate reading than a standard automatic cuff. But for the purpose of screening, for the purpose of knowing whether your result is in the normal range or whether something needs a closer look, a standard home blood pressure cuff gives you a result that is meaningful and actionable. Margaret's cardiologist told her this directly. He said the home version is not as precise as the clinical version, but it is more than good enough to tell you whether you should come in for the clinical version. If you do it at home and your result is clearly in the normal range, that is reassuring information. If you do it at home and your result is below 0.9, that is a result you bring to your doctor immediately. The home test is the first filter. The clinical test is the confirmation. She asked why more people were not doing this. He said, because no one tells them it exists. What Margaret did next with this information? After her cardiologist explained the homocysteine connection, Margaret went back through everything she remembered from the last 10 years of appointments. Every blood panel she had kept. Every note she had taken. She had been meticulous about it. 12 folders in a drawer at home, one for each year. Lab results printed and circled. She had done everything right. And what she found when she went through them is going to stay with you. Homocysteine was not on a single one of them. She also looked for high-sensitivity CRP, the inflammation marker. Not on any of them. She looked for an A1C from more than 2 years ago, before she had started asking for it herself based on something she had read. Not there either. Oxidized LDL never appeared. 12 years of thorough, careful annual blood work. 12 years of being told everything looked good. And the 4 tests that would have pointed most directly at what was happening in her artery walls were not on any of them. She is not angry about this. She told me that when she went through those folders, she was not looking to be angry. She was just trying to understand the full picture. To know what the years of appointments had and had not been covering. To know what information existed that nobody had been gathering. The thing that struck her was not what was missing. It was that she had not known to ask. She had trusted the system to order the tests that mattered. The system had ordered the tests in its guidelines. Those tests were measuring the right things for the right questions. Just not the questions that most mattered for her arteries specifically. She told me that when she finally understood this, she stopped feeling like she had done something wrong by not catching it earlier. She had not done anything wrong. She had been doing exactly what a responsible patient does. She had just been working inside a system that was answering a different question than the one that mattered most for her. That is what the home test is. The question the system was not asking. Answerable at home, with equipment most seniors already have, in 10 minutes lying flat. Margaret told me that when she finally did the test and saw her own number, the thing that stayed with her was not the number itself. It was the fact that the information had been available the whole time. That any afternoon in the last 5 years, she could have lain down on her bed with her blood pressure cuff and gotten a signal that something needed attention. She did not need a scan. She did not need to wait for a radiologist looking for something else to stumble onto the problem. She needed a blood pressure cuff and 10 minutes and the information she is about to give you. She said, the thing that matters most is not that people do the test and panic. It is that people do the test and know. Because knowing gives you something to bring to the appointment. A number, a specific result, something concrete for a doctor to respond to. Not a feeling that something might be off. Not a general worry. A measurement. And measurements get taken seriously in a way that general worries do not. You are about to have that measurement. Here is how to get it. The home test. What it is, how to do it, and what your number means. Here is something your body has built in that most people never think about. Your blood pressure at your ankle should be roughly the same as your blood pressure at your arm. Maybe a little higher at the ankle because you are standing and blood has traveled down with gravity, but roughly the same. When it is not the same, the gap is information. If there is real blockage in the arteries between your heart and your ankle, the pressure at your ankle will be lower than the pressure at your arm. Because the blood loses pressure trying to push through a narrowed section. The more narrowed the section, the more pressure is lost. The ankle reads lower. The difference between the two numbers tells you whether there is likely blockage somewhere in that path. And here is why that matters so much. The arteries between your heart and your ankle run through your legs and your abdomen. The same clogging process that happens there tends to happen in the arteries going to your heart and your brain at the same time. And measuring the flow in your leg is the window into what is happening everywhere else. This is why the test works. Your heart arteries going to your heart and your brain at the same time. It is a system-wide process. The buildup does not usually show up in just one location. When the arteries to the legs are narrowing, the arteries to the heart are usually part of the same picture. This means you can get a real look at what is happening in your arteries by measuring something you can actually reach at home, right now, with what you already have. You cannot easily check the pressure inside the arteries going to your heart, but you can check the pressure at your ankle. And that number tells you something real about what is happening in the rest of the system. This test has a clinical name. It is called the Ankle-Brachial Index. That is what your doctor will call it if you bring it up. You do not need to remember it for the test, but knowing the name means you can say it at your next appointment, and your doctor will understand exactly what you are talking about. Here is how to do it. You need a standard blood pressure cuff, the kind that wraps around your upper arm and inflates. Most seniors already have one at home. If you do not, they are widely available for under $20. You do not need a special ankle cuff. The regular arm cuff works fine. Step 1. Lie down flat on your back on a bed or on the floor. Do not do this sitting up or standing. Lying flat is important because you want gravity out of the equation. Rest quietly for 5 minutes before you start. Do not do this right after exercise, right after a big meal, or right after coffee. You want your body as calm as possible. Step 2. Measure your blood pressure at your upper arm the normal way. Wrap the cuff around the upper arm, inflate it, let it read. Write down the top number. That is your arm pressure for this test. Step 3. Move the cuff to your ankle. Wrap it just above the ankle bone where your leg starts to narrow. The same snugness as on your arm. Take a reading. Write down the top number. That is your ankle pressure. Step 4. Divide the ankle number by the arm number. That is your result. Here is what the number means. Between 1.0 and 1.4 is normal. Your ankle pressure is roughly the same as, or a little higher than, your arm pressure. Blood is getting through freely. This is the range you want to be in. Between 0.9 and 1.0 is borderline. Worth doing the test again the next morning to confirm. Worth bringing to your doctor and saying, "I did this at home and I want it evaluated properly." Below 0.9 means the pressure at your ankle is noticeably lower than at your arm. Blood is losing pressure somewhere on the way down. That gap is measurable. That gap is information your blood test has never given you. Blood is losing pressure somewhere between your heart and your ankle. This is a result that needs a proper medical follow-up. It is not a reason to sit down and worry. It is a reason to pick up the phone and make an appointment. And when you do, you will have something real to hand over. It is a reason to make an appointment and say, "I did a simple home test and I would like this looked at properly with medical equipment." Above 1.4 is also something to bring to a doctor. It can mean the arteries in the leg have become so stiff they are not compressing properly under the cuff. That stiffness is its own sign of arterial aging that needs attention. Most seniors, the number to watch for is below 0.9. Margaret did this test after her cardiologist explained it to her. Her result was 0.78, clearly below the line. She asked what that meant. He said that result, if she had come to him with it 2 years ago, before the scan, would have sent her for imaging immediately. It would have been taken very seriously. She would not have had to wait for an accident during an unrelated procedure to find out her arteries needed attention. She asked why nobody had told her to do this. He said, "Honestly, because it is not in the routine guidelines, and we do not have time in the appointment to cover things that are not in the guidelines." She asked if it was a useful test. He said yes, absolutely. For anyone worried about their arterial health, it is one of the most practical things they can do at home. She asked why the guidelines had not included it. He said he agreed it should move faster. That was all he said. Now here is how to use your result. If your number is normal, that is genuinely good information. It does not mean your arteries are perfect. It means blood pressure is getting through the system the way it should. Test again in 6 months. Keep it as one piece of the picture. And share this with someone who has been told their cholesterol is fine, but has never been given the second question. If your number is borderline or low, write it down and bring it to your next appointment. Say the words, "I did an Ankle-Brachial Index test at home, and I want this evaluated properly." A cardiologist who sees a number below 0.9 is going to pay attention to that. They will refer you for a proper medical test with the right equipment. That test confirms and clarifies what the home reading showed. Do the test twice. 2 mornings in a row, lying flat, 5 minutes of rest before each one. Results can vary slightly based on recent activity, caffeine, or stress. 2 consistent results give you a picture you can trust. What is actually causing the buildup, and what you can do about it. The home test tells you the state of the arteries right now. It does not change what is driving the clogging process. That requires a different conversation. And there are 4 things almost certainly not being addressed in the standard annual appointment that are directly feeding the buildup in most seniors. The first is the inflammation marker that is not on your panel. Everything I described about the clogging process, the damaged inner lining, the rough surface, the cholesterol catching on it, all of that is being driven by inflammation inside the artery wall. Chronic, low-level, constant inflammation that never fully settles down. And that inflammation can be measured. There is a specific test for it. It is called high-sensitivity CRP. CRP stands for C-reactive protein. When the body is inflamed, this protein rises in the blood. When inflammation is under control, it stays low. A high-sensitivity CRP result gives you a direct reading of how much quiet inflammation is running in your body right now. It is the number that explains why some people with normal cholesterol are still building up blockage. It is not included in the standard annual blood panel. You can ask for it by name. High-sensitivity CRP. Write that down before your next appointment. If your result comes back elevated, you have something specific to work on. A real number. The inflammation is active. You now have a baseline, something to watch as you make changes. Not just a general suggestion to eat better and exercise more. A specific, measurable thing that is contributing to the clogging process in your arteries. Margaret's high-sensitivity CRP was elevated when it was finally tested after her scan. It had almost certainly been elevated for years. Had anyone measured it, the number would have been a signal. Something driving the process inside her arteries that the cholesterol test was never going to catch. The second is the omega-3 dose most people are not actually getting. Most seniors have heard that fish oil is good for the heart, but almost no one has been told what the right amount actually is. And the difference between what most people take and what the research used is not small. Most seniors taking fish oil are taking a dose that is too low to do the specific job that matters for arterial health. Here is why. Fish oil capsules are labeled by how much oil is in them. 1 gram. 1,000 milligrams. That sounds like a real amount. But the part that actually does the job in your artery walls is not the oil. It is two specific things inside the oil. They are called EPA and DHA. They are listed on the label separately, in smaller print. Add those two numbers together. That is your real dose. Most people never do that. They look at the capsule size and assume that is what matters. It is not. A typical standard fish oil capsule has between 200 and 300 milligrams of combined EPA and DHA, even when the label says 1 gram of fish oil. The research dose for real work on artery inflammation is 2 to 4 grams of combined EPA and DHA daily. Not 2 to 4 grams of fish oil, 2 to 4 grams of the active components. That is roughly 7 to 15 standard capsules a day. Most seniors taking 1 or 2 capsules a day are not in the range where the research shows meaningful effects. A concentrated fish oil product lists the EPA and DHA amount prominently because those are the active components. That is what to look for. 2 to 4 grams of combined EPA and DHA, not total oil, the active components. The third is the blood sugar picture that requires one more number. Your annual blood work probably includes a fasting glucose. That is your blood sugar level on the morning of the blood draw, after you have been fasting overnight. It is a useful number, but it only tells you what your blood sugar was doing for a few hours before the test. There is another number that tells you what your blood sugar has been doing for the past 3 months. It is called hemoglobin A1C. It is a different measurement entirely. It reflects the average blood sugar across the entire past 90 days, not just the morning of the test. A person can have a perfectly normal fasting glucose and still have an elevated A1C. This happens when blood sugar spikes significantly after meals and then comes back down before the morning test. The morning test looks fine. The A1C reveals that blood sugar has been spending significant time elevated throughout the day. This matters for artery health because elevated blood sugar does something specific to the inner lining of the artery wall. It attaches to the proteins in that lining in a way that makes the surface stiffer and stickier, more likely to catch cholesterol, more prone to damage. The process happens gradually, but constantly, every time blood sugar runs high after a meal. And it is completely invisible to the fasting glucose test if the sugar is back to normal by morning. Margaret's fasting glucose was always in the normal range. Her A1C had never been checked. When it was measured after her scan, it was in the elevated range, not diabetic, but high enough to have been contributing to the stiffening and roughening of her artery walls for years, while the fasting glucose looked fine. Because the fasting glucose was not measuring the right window. You can ask for an A1C at your next blood draw if you have never had one. Just say, "I would like my hemoglobin A1C included this year." It is a standard test. It will be done from the same blood draw. It adds one number to the picture, but it is a number that the fasting glucose cannot give you. The fourth is the homocysteine conversation you now need to have. You know about homocysteine from earlier in this video, the waste product that scratches the inside of the artery wall and creates the rough surface that cholesterol catches on. You know it can be elevated even when cholesterol is normal. You know it is almost never included in the standard panel. You know that B6, B12, and folate are what the body uses to clear it. Here is the next step. Ask for your homocysteine level at your next appointment. Write down that word, homocysteine. Say it. "I would like my homocysteine level checked. I have been reading about the connection to arterial health and I want to know my number." If it comes back elevated, ask about the methylated form of B12. Here is why this matters. Regular B12 supplements sometimes are not absorbed properly by people who have a common genetic variation that affects how B vitamins are processed. The methylated form bypasses that issue. It is not an exotic supplement. It is a specific version of the same vitamin. Your doctor or a pharmacist who knows supplements can advise on this. The methylated form bypasses that issue. Your doctor or a knowledgeable pharmacist can advise on this, but you need the number first. You cannot address something you have not measured. Margaret's cardiologist told her after the scan that had she known to ask for a homocysteine level years earlier, and had it come back elevated, and had she addressed it with targeted B vitamins, the damage accumulating in her artery walls might have slowed significantly. The scratching process would have been less aggressive. The buildup might have progressed more slowly. She sat for a moment. Then she said something quietly that her cardiologist wrote down in her chart. She said, "The information was available the whole time. The test existed. The research existed. I just never knew to ask, and no appointment ever told me this was something I could ask." He said yes. That is an accurate description of what happened. She said she was not angry. She understood that the system was not designed to be malicious. It was designed to do a specific job efficiently in 15 minutes. The job it was designed to do, it did. The job it was not designed to do, it left undone. And nobody warned her that there was a second job that was not being done. This is the pattern you now understand. Not bad doctors, not bad patients, a system that answers one set of questions efficiently and has no time for the second set. The second set is what you are building here. How to bring all of this to your doctor. You now have more than most people walk into a medical appointment with. You have a home test result. You have 4 specific blood tests to request. You have the clinical name for the home test, so your doctor knows exactly what you are describing. You have the names of each test, so you can ask for them by name. And you have something Margaret did not have until it was almost too late. A home result that changes the whole conversation. Write these down before your next appointment. Ankle-Brachial Index, your home result and what it was. Oxidized LDL. Homocysteine. High-sensitivity CRP. Hemoglobin A1C. That is the list. Those 5 things together, combined with the standard panel you are already getting, give you a picture of your arterial health that the standard appointment alone cannot produce. When you sit down with your doctor, say this: "I have been doing some reading about arterial health, and I have a few things I would like to add to my blood work this year. I also did a home test that I want to show you." Then hand over your ankle result. Then go through the list. A good doctor will take all of this seriously. A few of these tests they may already have reasons to order or not order based on your specific situation. That conversation is the right one to have. What you are doing is changing what you bring into the room. Margaret told me that her second appointment after the scan was the first one in years where she felt like she understood what was being measured and why. She came in with questions. She left with answers. She said it felt different from every appointment she had before. Not because her doctor changed, because she changed what she brought to the room. She also told me she does the ankle test at home every month now. She knows her number. She tracks whether it is moving in the right direction as she works through the interventions her cardiologist has recommended. She said it is the first time in years of appointments that she has had something she could check herself that told her something real. Something the blood test could not. Something that came from 10 minutes and a cuff and a flat surface. Something specific. Something hers. Specific to the arteries themselves. The morning you lie flat on your bed, wrap the cuff around your ankle, take a reading, divide 2 numbers, and see a result that no blood test in 12 years of appointments ever gave you. Write it down. That number goes with you to the appointment. Your doctor looks at it. You watch his expression. He picks up the phone and says, "Let me get you a referral." You drive home from that appointment differently than you have driven home from any appointment in years. Not because the news was good or bad, because something was finally found. Something specific. A number that came from you, not from a lab order, from 10 minutes on your bed. That is what that number can do. That is what the first link in the description is for. It says, "Get your protocol." There are people watching this right now who have been going to every appointment for years, who have been getting the same blood panel, whose doctor has told them everything looks good, who have no symptoms, who have no reason to think anything is wrong, who are where Margaret was before the scan. Not because something is definitely wrong with their arteries, but because they have never been given the tools to actually check. Because the system they are working inside does not have time for the second question. Because the test that answers the first question gets done every year, and the test that answers the second question has never been ordered. You now have both questions, and you have a way to start answering the second one today, with a blood pressure cuff. Lying flat, 10 minutes, one number divided by another. A result that tells you something the cholesterol test has never been able to tell you. If you are not subscribed, subscribe now. The next video covers what specifically drives the inflammation inside artery walls, the specific things that accelerate the clogging process, and the specific things that slow it down, in a way the standard appointment never goes into. It is the direct follow-up to everything you learned today. Subscribe so you do not miss it. Leave a comment right now with whether you have ever been told to check your blood pressure at your ankle. Just yes or no. And if you have already done this test before watching this video, I want to know that too. Leave your result in the comments. I read every one. The pattern in those answers tells me exactly what information is and is not reaching people through the standard appointment. If you know someone who has been going to their annual appointments for years, getting the same blood panel, being told their cholesterol is fine, and still wondering whether their arteries are okay, share this video with them now. The cholesterol question and the artery question are two different questions. Most people only know about the first one. The share button is right there.